Emani should be a sophomore in college right now. Should be preparing for the next stages in her life. Finding out what she loves, finding out who she loves. Experiencing everything that comes with being a 20-year-old. But Emani can't, because Emani is no longer here with us. And I'm going to tell you why. This is Parental Advisory. I'm your host, Prez Remo, and in this episode, I'm going to tell you all about the murder of Emani Gabrielle Moss. Disclaimer: child abuse is a very touchy subject, and some of the things you hear on this podcast may not sit well with you, mentally or spiritually, and it's okay to tap out of an episode. I just want to make sure I'm being as informative as I can in hopes that we can prevent other cases like the one we're about to hear today. All opinions are my own, and any case-related information can be backed up by sources. Now that that's out the way, let me tell you about a case. When you hear the story of Cinderella, you don't even believe it's true. You can't sit there and fathom that someone can lock their child up and make them clean and do all their chores while the other siblings can just live freely doing what they want to do. No one can fathom that. That it doesn't. It's a fairy tale, you know. It's a Disney story. It's not real. And then you hear this story that we're going to be talking about today, and you're like, get the fuck out of here. Like, there's really evil stepmothers out here in the world. There's really Cinderellas. It's just, unfortunately, this Cinderella didn't get to have a glass slipper. This Cinderella didn't get to have a pumpkin that turns into a carriage. There was no fairy godmother. And this is a tough story, but we're gonna get into it right here. Thank you guys for tuning in today. We're gonna get into this. Now, Cinderella eventually finds her Prince Charming. There's a happy ending to that story. But to this Cinderella story, there is no happy ending. There's no glass slipper. There's no pumpkin that turns into a carriage. There's no fairy godmothers. It's just a monster who doesn't deserve to be a parent. And thankfully, she will never be a parent again. But Emani Gabrielle Moss deserved so much better than what she got. So much better than what she got. But here we are, here we are. So we're going to tell you a little bit about Emani to start this off. We'll get to Tiffany. We'll get to Iman, her dad. Those are basically the three main characters in this story. So let's work. Emani Gabrielle Moss was born on April 23rd, 2003. And shortly after Imani's birth, her mother, addicted to drugs, surrendered her parental rights, and Imani's father, Iman, gained sole custody of her. Now, Emani was one of 5 children born to her mother, and her mother surrendered parental rights to all 5 of them. So she has no rights to her children. But then there's Iman, who has the rights to Emani, and he, you would think he's a good guy. He steps up to the plate. But we come to find out in 2004, he was charged with and convicted of battery and second-degree child cruelty after beating Imani's biological mother in front of her. So clearly this guy isn't a great dad. He's not number one dad. He's not going to get the mug. He's not going to get the pin. He's not going to get the t-shirt. This dude is special. If you really want to think about it, he's a very special guy. Him having child cruelty charges for beating Imani's biological mother while Emani is 1 year old should have told the police everything they needed to know in that situation, that maybe this isn't the best place for Emani. But no, of course not. They let him go. He moves on with Emani. He's raising her by himself. And he often took her to the Freedom Christian Church. Now, the churches is always involved in these situations. And it's weird because it seems like you would think, oh, these guys are church-going people. They're good people. But they're not. But here is where he met Tiffany Moss. Now, Tiffany Moss at the time was a preschool teacher. That's how she made her living. And she probably wanted to continue being a preschool teacher. But because of what she did that I'm about to tell you, she's not allowed to be a preschool teacher. So she goes on and marries Iman. They get married July 2009. They have 2 children together, a son and a daughter. Now, there are no records indicating that Tiffany abused the biological children at all. None. 0. But Emani, she got abused all the time. The abuse increased in March 2010 after a beating of Emani caused Moss to lose her job. So Emani, she was age 6 at the time. She told the school nurse that she feared going home with a bad report card because she worried her parents would hurt her. She also told the nurse that the stepmother had spanked her with a curtain rod. The nurse then found multiple scabs, bruises, and welts on Emani's arms, back, chest, legs, and shoulders, and Emani was taken to police headquarters. Now, this is 2004. It's not 1980. You would think at this point you would get this child out of that home, but no, they did not get this child out of that home. They continued to allow that child to live there. And of course, it did not end. Let's just continue. So Tiffany's arrested, charged with first-degree child cruelty. Tiffany admitted to hitting Emani 3 times after she failed to do her homework. She pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 5 years of probation as part of Georgia's first offenders program. The Georgia Division of Family and Children's Services, GDFCS, signed the plea deal. Now, GDFCS dismissed the case against Tiffany and Iman after they completed parenting classes. You know, those good old parenting classes. You go for a couple days, couple weeks, and they automatically deem you fit to be a parent again. So Emani ends up back in that same toxic environment that she just left. But after the March 2010 beating, Emani was taken from her father and stepmother's home and placed with her grandmother Robin, staying with her for about 6 months. During this time, Imani's school performance improved. So you would think, yeah, let's keep her with the grandma. Let's keep her with the grandma. But no, of course not. Of course not. Why? Because Iman, the father, he started to fight for custody in the fall of 2010. Now, the GDFCS returned her to him at that time. Robin fought to retain custody of her granddaughter. Though she suspected Emani was being abused, she could not persuade authorities to give her custody. Prosecutors later argued at trial that the March 2010 abuse incident launched an escalating cycle of more abuse that ultimately resulted in Imani's death. Because Tiffany Moss pleaded guilty to beating Emani, she was no longer allowed to teach preschool. Now, I'm kind of happy. And if you are a parent in the Lawrenceville, Georgia area, you should be happy that she is not a preschool teacher for your kids, because She's a terrible person. She's literally what you would call a monster. Says for the next several years, Moss continued to abuse Emani. In July 2012, Emani tried to run away from home. In one case, she went to the apartment office and told him she wanted to run away because Moss had tied her up with a belt and placed her in a cold shower. The police responded and were told by Moss that Emani was not telling the truth. Because there was not enough evidence to charge anyone, Emani was returned to Eman and Moss. In another July 2012 incident, Emani ran away and was found sleeping in the bushes of a nearby apartment complex by a police officer. Emani told the police officer that she had run away because her stepmother was mean to her. The officer reported the event to GDFCS and filed runaway and curfew violation charges, and Emani had to see a juvenile court judge. The system is so broken. The system is terrible. As a former kid that had to be in that system, I can tell you firsthand, the system is broken. Especially if you're a brown or black kid. The system is severely broken. From 2011 to the summer of 2013, the Moss family moved around, sometimes living with family. Eman, who worked long hours, did not see his daughters often. He later reported at trial that she would eat a lot when he saw her on the weekends when he was in charge of the children. When the Mosses lived on their own, Emani rarely saw extended family. It was around May 2013 that the Mosses visited Emani's sister, Cheryl Niece, for Mother's Day. Cheryl Niece and Robin noticed that Emani's hair had been cut. When Robin confronted Moss about it, Moss had the nerve to say out of her mouth, "If you act ugly, you should look ugly." Cheryl Niece also noticed that Emani acted more timid. After that school year, Eman and Moss announced that they would pull Emani from public school and start to homeschool her. The sister then called GDFCS again, asking them to intervene. Still, the Department of Children and Family Services declined. In August 2013, Department of Family and Children Services received an anonymous tip that Emani was being neglected by her father and stepmother and appeared to be thin. According to a lawsuit against that same office filed by Robin, the Georgia Department of Children and Family Services did not visit the home and did not conduct a follow-up due to having no current address and no current maltreatment. So it was stated long before Emani's death that she was looking thin, that she needed some help, and repeatedly the Department of Family and Children Services did nothing. Absolutely nothing. Emani should still be here with us today, but the Department of Family and Children Services did nothing to intervene. It was that Mother's Day, though, that the family said that was the last time they seen Emani. The only people that said that they seen her afterwards was the family, the father, the stepmother, the siblings. They saw her alive. It was then in the late summer of 2013, Eman, Moss, and their children, they moved to the apartment in Lawrenceville, Georgia. According to the district attorney, Danny Porter, this was when, for all intents and purposes, Emani vanished from the face of the earth. Iman said during this time that he worked 2 jobs, making him largely unpresent. He would leave early in the morning, come back in the afternoon, then leave again for his second job around 6, come back around 10:30, 11. While Iman was at work, Moss was left to care for the children. And at some point, Moss began to stop feeding Emani. Just straight up starving her. At this time, Emani was confined to her bedroom. The neighbors only saw Moss's biological children and did not know that they even had an older sister. Emani eventually became too weak to move and would not leave her bed, urinate, or defecate. Though Moss denied food to Emani, she did take care of and feed her 2 biological children. On several occasions, she sent Iman pictures of meals that she had prepared for the children. In one instance, she even asked him to bring home some cookie dough so she could make some cookies. Imagine having to be Emani, sitting in that room. Imagine having to be Emani sitting in that room while those cookies baked. You're hungry. You're thirsty. And all you can smell is cookies baking throughout the house. And I mean, this woman was a monster. This woman was a monster. It was October 24th. Emani suffered what Iman believed was a seizure, and Iman testified that when he came home, Moss had told him something was wrong with Emani. He then went into the bathroom and found that his daughter was in the bathtub shaking. Emani was unresponsive and her eyes was rolling back and forth. Iman moved Emani to her bed, where she stayed for the next couple of days. So, you look at your daughter, you see how she is, and you take her back to her room and put her back in the bed. That's what this man did. Iman said he tried to visit her a couple times and tried to feed her, but was unsuccessful. She was literally dying. On October 28, 2013, Emani died. The doctor that seen her described her as being more or less skin and bones. She weighed 32 pounds. The weight of the average 3-year-old. Additionally, her organs was found to be very small at the autopsy. But you think that's where we end. You think that's where her pain would end. But it doesn't. On October 28th, Moss called Iman at work to tell him that Emani was dead. Iman testified at trial that when he came home from work, the family seemed normal. The children was playing. Moss was watching TV. He found his daughter lying on the blanket on her bedroom floor. He told his wife they should call the police, though she insisted they couldn't because she would lose her children. Moss told Iman that they needed to hide Emani's body and be on our criminal mind, quote unquote. So Emani's father wrapped Emani's body with blankets and moved her to the computer room. The couple kept Emani's body in their apartment for several days, and their lives largely pretty much went back to normal. Iman testified at his trial that he would go to work and spend time at home with Emani's body grieving. It's like you've already did the most ultimate sin. You already committed the ultimate sin. So you cover it up. The day after Emani's death, Moss went to Anna's Linens, bought new sheets, a new coverall, because the ones Emani was covered with excrement and urine. Moss suggested burying Emani and reporting her as a runaway. The father went to Walmart. He bought and galvanized trash can, trash bags, charcoal, lighter fluid, and on Halloween, Tiffany Moss and Iman decided to put Imani's body in a trash can and burn it. But they couldn't. They tried to place her in a trash can, and they found that she was too stiff because of rigor mortis. So they used duct tape to compress the body, covered it with a comforter. In the early morning of November 1st, the Moss couple put the trash can containing Imani's body in the back of their car, and with their children, they looked for a place to burn it. They found the location, removed the trash can from the car, added some charcoal briquettes to the bottom of the can, doused little Imani's body with lighter fluid, and then they set it on fire. And as the couple watched the body burn, they found that it wouldn't. So after about 5 minutes, they extinguished the fire and took the body back to the apartment. Wild. That was fucking ridiculous. Instead of just taking accountability for your wrongs, you decided to try to burn that little girl's body and let your other kids watch. The father helped. That's the crazy shit about it all. Like, the father was down with trying to cover it up instead of being like, yo, you killed my daughter. I'm out there trying to make money to make sure these bills is paid, and you killed my daughter. But Iman, he went back to work with Imani's body still in the back of a car. He confessed to a friend about the crime, and his friend urged him to call the police. He thought about it, and after coming home from his second job, he decided to contact the police. So at 4 a.m. that next morning, he made the call saying he was suicidal. Iman informed Moss about his call to the police. Upon learning that he called the police, Moss went outside, placed the trash can and Imani's remains in a grassy area at the apartment, and fled in the family vehicle with her children. Upon arrival at the apartment, the police was told by Iman that Emani had drunk some chemicals and died. He claimed that she had panicked and put her body in a trash can outside the apartment and tried to cremate it. Police found the body though, and of course they didn't believe Iman's story, quickly identifying him and his wife as suspects. Almost immediately he was arrested. But Moss, She knew she was going down. She dropped her children off at her mother's house and ultimately turned herself in. Emani confessed to covering up Imani's murder by reporting her as a runaway and trying to burn her body. And in 2015, he pled guilty to felony murder and concealing a death. What did he get? Life. He's currently incarcerated at the Smith State Prison in Glenville, Georgia. But the case against Moss, it went to trial. She pled not guilty. She's a wild one. So in 2019, this is when Moss's trial begins. It was presided over by Judge George Hutchinson. The jury consisted of 6 women, 6 men. It's pretty even. Moss was appointed lawyers through the state office of the Capital Defender, but she decided to represent herself. Now, the judge is like, you have no education in criminal law, but you want to represent yourself. He tried to persuade her, like, are you sure you don't want anybody to represent you? You don't want nobody to be here for you. She was like, nah, I'm cool. I got this. I can handle this. So basically, instead of representing her, her defense attorney served as standby attorneys to answer any legal questions she had. And during pretrial hearings, the judge again urged Moss to rely upon the standby counsel, but she refused. Moss did not give an opening statement. The district attorney did. His opening statement was compelling. She did not cross-examine a witness, nor did she give a closing argument. District Attorney Danny Porter and Assistant District Attorney Lisa Jones called 18 witnesses, including Imani's aunt, her grandmother, and her 4th grade teacher. They even brought Emani from prison and Dr. Staffenberg, the medical examiner who performed an autopsy on Imani's body. On April 29th, 2019, Moss was convicted on all 6 counts, including 1 count of malice murder, 2 counts of felony murder, 2 counts of cruelty to children, 1 count of concealing a death. It didn't take the jury long, less than 3 hours. During the sentencing phase, Moss declined to address the jury, present mitigating evidence, have her relatives who had attended the trial testify on her behalf. Basically, she just gave up. She also refused to make a closing argument then. In the state's closing argument, though, Porter argued that Moss did not deserve a life sentence, whether it be a life sentence with parole or a life without parole sentence. She should not be given an opportunity to be released, he argued, because she would never change. She's shown you too much of her capacity for cruelty, he said. There will always be that dark side waiting to come out. He also argued that for Moss, life without parole would not be a worse sentence than death because she did not regret her crimes and would never be bothered by them. I felt that. Watching parts of her criminal trial, she didn't care. This was a spectacle to her. This was an opportunity just to twist the knife, I guess. After closing arguments, the jury began deliberating. After the first day, they appeared conflicted and were told by Judge Hutchison to go home, sleep on it. They continued deliberations the next day and ultimately agreed on a death penalty as a punishment for Moss. So on May 1st, Judge Hutchison agreed with the jury's recommendation. He sentenced Moss, then age 36, to death by lethal injection. Moss was the first person to be sentenced to death in Georgia in over 5 years. She was scheduled to be executed between June 7th and June 14th, 2019. But of course, she got the automatic stay of execution being applied to the initial execution date. And she's currently incarcerated at Arendelle State Prison and is Georgia's only female death row inmate. If Moss was eventually executed, she would be the third woman in Georgia to be executed since 1945. And despite representing herself at trial, Moss accepted legal representation in her appeal. Soon after she was sentenced to death, the Georgia Capital Defender Group filed a motion asking for a new trial, arguing, among other things, that Moss was not competent to act as her attorney. According to her attorneys, Moss had neuropsychological testing data that showed the defendant to have damage to the premotor and prefrontal regions of the brain. A status hearing regarding the motion was held on August 23, 2019. Emani and Moss, they remained married. They lost custody of their 2 children, of course. The children were sent to live with foster parents. The Moss couple, along with both Moss and Emani's mothers, tried to gain custody. In 2019, Porter told local news the children were adopted by their foster parents, thankfully. The couple's son, who was 3 years old when Emani was murdered, reportedly did have some memories of the crime. However, according to Porter at the time of the interview in April 2019, the children were doing great and may never know what happened. Emani's murder led to criticisms of systematic changes in Georgia's child welfare system. After the murder, an intake case manager, a social service administrator, and a program assistant at the GDFCS were all terminated. Others were reportedly disciplined. The murder led the department to enact reforms, including deeper investigations into allegations of abuse and changing how it examines maltreatment reports. New case managers and supervisors were hired, reducing the caseloads. Agency workers no longer decide whether reports warrant investigations based entirely on information gathered over a telephone. Additionally, no case is assigned a less serious, low priority status until a caseworker meets a child who allegedly has been abused. After Emani's death, along with several other abuse-related deaths, the Child Welfare Reform Council was commissioned by Governor Nathan Deal. In January 2015, the council released a report with recommendations on ways to improve Georgia's child welfare system. In 2018, Emani's grandmother, Robin, filed a lawsuit in Gwinnett County State Court against the GDFCS, arguing the caseworkers were aware of deteriorating conditions and abuse in the Moss family and could have acted earlier. And I fucking agree. Robin is also suing the Department of Human Services. She is seeking a jury trial and reasonable compensatory damages. According to the lawsuit, there were multiple occasions where the department could have investigated the Moss household and intervened on behalf of Emani. As a result of the negligence of DFCS and its agents, Emani suffered constant abuse and deprivation from 2008 until her untimely death. The lawsuit also states, as a direct and proximate result of defendant's wrongful conduct, plaintiff is entitled to recover for the wrongful death of Emani, including the full value of the economic and non-economic value of her life had she lived. Emani should still be here with us. The system is broken. The system failed Emani. That's what made me talk about this story today. And it's what's going to make me talk about other stories down the road. As a former foster kid, someone who had to live in that same system, that same broken system, from the time he was born almost until the time he was 18 years old, he was an adult. And knowing what I had to endure as a young adult growing, because the system is so terribly broken that it doesn't help you. It helps themselves. It helps the government continues to make money. It funnels in drug companies to keep giving you drugs. But they're not doing much to help. Who knows if Emani's situation, well, we know. I can say maybe Emani's situation would have been better than what she had experienced. Fortunately, I got to live through my situation, but Emani didn't. Tiffany Nicole Moss is a monster. Emani Moss is a monster. They will never see the light of day again. There's no chance they will ever be out. And when Tiffany goes, I don't think anybody will be sad. There'll be dry eyes everywhere. I'm gonna keep telling these stories for the little boys and girls who can't tell their stories anymore. And we're gonna bring to light these monsters that's out here. I am Prez Remo. This was the story of Emani Gabrielle Moss. And on the next episode of Parental Advisory, we're gonna head down to Florida. This story hit home a lot because I was in a boys' home for 6 years. So when I saw this story, it really, really hit home. So I'm going to talk about that one, about the Florida School of the Boys. So make sure you tune in next episode with me, your host, Prez Remo, for another episode of Parental Advisory. Make sure you're subscribed so you can get notifications every episode that we drop. Also, help us out by leaving a 5-star review or a comment and letting us know what you think of this episode. Follow us on social media at Twitter at Bad Parents Pod. You can also follow the host on Twitter at the fake Prez Remo. On that note, I'm signing off. And until next time.